Hey, everybody, and welcome once again to Nose in the Book, a Bible reading commentary with me, your host, Pastor Justin Van Reed. Great to have you with me once again. Today we have 5 chapters from the Word of God for us to take a look at because we're going to look at 2 Psalms again from the book of Leviticus where we begin. We'll look at chapter 21, consider what's there, and then in Psalms, as I said, there's 2 Psalms here, 26 and 27, and then from Ecclesiastes, we're up to chapter 4, and in the New Testament, we are up to 1 Timothy chapter 6, and we are going to conclude the Paul's first letter to Timothy here today. All right, Leviticus chapter 21. What we have here are instructions or rules for the priests in particular. We've had a number of commands, about unclean and clean, and about various pagan practices that are forbidden, and things like that. And so that, just in general for the whole congregation, for the whole nation of Israel, now we get some of these similar things, but specifically now applied to the priests, and some rules specific for the priests and how they are to conduct themselves and the qualities and characteristics that they are to have. All right, so we have here first of all, no touching of the dead, right? So that that would make one unclean. And so he starts off here: priest must not make himself ceremonially unclean by touching the dead body of a relative. There are exceptions, his closest relatives here, but again, must not defile himself and make himself unclean for someone who's related to him only by marriage. All right, so only his closest family is he to take care of there. And then, a number of other things, some ritualistic things. If you're wondering, like in verses 5 and 6, is this just a matter of, God being against haircuts? A lot of these things in this chapter that, why the priests had to do certain things is because these were pagan practices and had a lot to do with pagan rituals and how they would worship these pagan idols. And so, since God is holy and called Israel to be holy, called the priests to be holy, and since they're going to worship the Lord with him in their midst there in the tabernacle, they are not to do so the way the nations around them did in these disgusting things and rituals that these nations practiced. And so that's what you have a lot of here. There are instructions for marriage here, so he can marry. There's some limits there. Obviously, not marry a woman defiled by prostitution, but he can, in fact, marry. And then we also have that, just like where the animals, there were instructions, remember, regarding animals having various defects, and so they couldn't be brought for an offering. So it's the same with the priests themselves, and there's a number of characteristics that are described here. And so because of these physical defects, they would still be able to be taken care of by, being of the priestly family, being fed by the altar food and things like that. It says in verse 22, he may eat from the food offered to God, including the holy offerings and the most holy offerings. But because of the physical defects, they're not going to actually carry on the same functions that the priest would carry on. And I believe this, again, is just because, as he says at the very end here, I am the Lord who makes them holy. And so, the Lord, this very unique and small distinction here, right? The road narrow, if you will, for those who are priests that could serve. And so there's, a number of rules that God gives all throughout the book of Leviticus and the surrounding books here, end of Exodus. But this again shows the holiness of God, and in a lot of these things, if you say, well, why? It could just be because God said so, and that has to be enough. And God's holy, and so God's saying this, it's got to be perfect. Remember, be perfect for I am perfect. And so there's no marks of the results of sin. It's obviously not an individual's fault if they have these various physical defects, but still would disqualify them nevertheless. But again, God cares for people, and so he's going to take care of them. They would be fed there, verse 22. All right, moving from Leviticus 21 to Psalm 26 and 27. Again here, Psalm 26, David's, I trust in you, I walk honorably, so Lord, treat me differently than sinners. Don't punish me along with the sinners. He starts off, listing out all these things that he does, all the ways in which he follows the Lord here, and how he trusts in God, and his innocence and everything. And so he says, don't let me suffer the fate of sinners. Don't condemn me along with them, right? I am not like them. I live with integrity. So show me mercy. So it's a prayer for God to respond to, a righteous person and treat them not like he would the wicked. Psalm 27, then, again here, we come with a cry of David, trusting the Lord. The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I be afraid? And again, we have the need for protection from enemies or those who oppose the psalmist. And so, similar theme to what we've seen in many of the psalms so far here. David starts off, I have no fear, right? I trust in the Lord. The Lord is my salvation. Even if an army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. I'll remain confident. But then he has this request here to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections, meditating in his temple, right? So, Lord, come near to me. Lord, give me this that I want. I want to live for you and honor you and obey you. Hear me as I pray. Be merciful and answer me. And then he comes to the end here. In essence, therefore, keep me close to you and protect me from my enemies. Don't let me fall into their hands, he says in verse 12. But I am confident in the Lord. So again, this similar to what we've seen in a number of Psalms so far. All right, moving to Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And we have several observations here that the preacher or teacher makes in this chapter. First of all, he's observed the injustice that there are those who are oppressed. He says, "I saw the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them." Right? They're helpless, and it doesn't look like this is even worth being alive. To suffer in this way. And he says that this I observed, and this too is an evil, and he's observing all the various evils under the sun. How about the envy of neighbors? He says, verse 4, in essence, I observe most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. What a sad statement, but so true. Most people, are covet their neighbors' things, and so that's what motivates them, not in trusting the Lord and resting in God and the things that He has provided. And then he goes on here for a little while talking about the advantages of companionship, loneliness being worse than companionship, and the benefits of coming alongside of someone, how two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. And so there's some general observations, kind of similar to the book of Proverbs, that the preacher teacher makes here, and just general observations about life. Talks about at the end of the chapter the futility of political power. How about that? Politicians come and go, he says. So they this one rises up to power, but then there's another one rise up to power, and people are so fickle in how they support one, and then they turn and they support the next one. And so this is also like chasing the wind. So this is the answer is not in politicians. The answer is not in political power. Okay, so he's going through. He's making a number of observations. So he's giving some wisdom and nuggets about. Here's the wisdom of life, but then also instructing that none of these things actually satisfy or answer apart from doing this in relationship to God and doing it for the Lord. So that's for Ecclesiastes chapter 4. And then we come to 1 Timothy chapter 6, and just a number of more commands from Paul as he concludes the letter to his friend. First of all, warning about false teachers who are greedy. So, as apparently these false teachers would come into the church, especially after Paul had left, and teach a slightly different gospel, changing what Paul had taught because, what they were after was financial gain. And so Paul says, really, he warns Timothy against this. He talks here about the dangers of greed, how we need to be content, right? He talks about how he says godliness, true godliness with contentment is great wealth. That's great gain. He says, we brought nothing into the world and with us, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. So he's teaching Timothy, don't chase after financial gain as though that's the answer in life. He talks about the dangers here. People who desire and long to be rich fall into all kinds of foolishness, temptation to sin, and all kinds of manners of sin. They love money more than they love the Lord, and they crave it. So Paul talks a lot here about money in this chapter. He comes back to it later, says to instruct the they instruct the rich in this world to be rich in good works and generous to those in need, right? And it's storing up treasure in heaven. That's, how, if one has wealth, they are to use it. So Timothy, run from that kind of life, run from greed, run from serving the Lord for financial gain. And instead, as he, has this great line here, fight the good fight of the faith, right? Stay firm, Timothy. Keep going in the right direction that you have started out. Avoid all the things that I've told you to avoid. Avoid all of these, anything that is not beneficial to people and to the, true regarding the gospel and the ministry you've been given. Stay away from it. All right, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for being with me as we took a look at Leviticus 21, Psalm 26 and 27, Ecclesiastes 4, and 1 Timothy chapter 6. Until next time, keep your eyes on the Lord and your nose in the book. We'll see you again soon.